Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
A full statewide recount has begun in Florida into the governor and Senate elections, which were held last week. It's the first time the state has carried out a recount after tallies from Tuesday's vote indicated the results were too close to call. The recount follows days of protests and legal arguments. In the race for the Senate seat, the sitting Republican Governor Rick Scott's lead over the incumbent Democrat Senator Bill Nelson was only 12,600 votes from a total of over 8 million. Now, the opposition to Theresa May's Brexit deal ramped up today with more threats to defeat the deal and more claims a no-deal Brexit can be stopped. But can it? And does any of this make a new referendum more likely? The biggest survey since the referendum last week, carried out for Channel 4 by Survation, suggested the UK is now 54-46 to remain. But Theresa May says no second referendum in any circumstances. In a moment, Alistair Campbell on why he thinks she'll be forced to change her mind. But first, what happened today? As Theresa May carries on with the exceptional duties of Prime Minister, new opposition to her Brexit plan is now the norm. Today, reports the EU has refused her attempt to keep the European Court of Justice out of the process if Brexit talks break down during the transition period. Her cabinet is openly divided over whether the UK could unilaterally leave the customs union. The leader of the House, Andrea Leadsom, said we could. The Education Secretary, Damien Hines, said we couldn't, warning of what happens if the government is defeated.
They need to think about what the alternatives are as well. It's no good just not liking individual aspects. You've got to have in mind, if you're going to take that view, you've got to have in mind a realistic, viable, deliverable alternative.
The DUP and hardline Tory Brexiteers and the European Research Group united with an article warning they will vote against the deal if they think it treats Northern Ireland differently to the rest of the UK, with new checks in the Irish Sea. Pro-EU Conservatives are also inspired, though, after Jo Johnson's resignation on Friday. Justine Greening renewed her calls for a new referendum, calling on Tories to vote down the Prime Minister's plan. Labour too is divided after Jeremy Corbyn told a German newspaper Brexit could not be stopped. Some think it could, some think it shouldn't. Emily Thornberry stuck to the agreed party line that a people's vote referendum is still on the table.
If we don't have a general election, which we think we should have, then yes, of course, all the options remain on the table, and we would, campaign for there to be a people's vote. But there are several stages before we get there.
Well, Alistair Campbell is one of the biggest advocates of a people's vote, another referendum. Suppose you got it, and suppose this time Britain voted to remain. Why should we follow the result of a new referendum when we haven't followed the result of the last one?
Well, the question that would arise then was whether the country could unite around it. And what's absolutely palpable since the 2016 referendum is the country just hasn't united. And I think we're seeing why. Because, the campaign was won on a lot of lies. The negotiations have been conducted, frankly, on a lot of fantasies. We're going to have our cake and eat it. And now the reality is coming up. And I think that the country is looking for a way out of this. And I think that the deal...
But we are divided as ever. 54-46 is not that different.
I accept that, but don't forget, that's after 2.5 years where the government, the opposition, most of the media has been saying there's no alternative to this. Why did almost 750,000 people take to the streets? Most of them probably never been on a march in their lives before, because I think there is a growing sense in the country. I think you saw it on your programme last week with some of the contributors on the floor, that people are starting to think, hold on, this has been a bit of a fantasy, but now it's becoming real, and we don't like what we see. Now, the deal, Theresa May has to do her best to try to get an agreement. And let's remember, we're just talking about the withdrawal agreement here, the divorce bill.
It's not the deal, it's just
not the deal.
Yeah.
This is just putting the deal off into a sort of blindfold Brexit. So if she really believes this is the right thing for the country, let the country say, yes, this is what we want, or not.
But does no part of you as a Democrat worry about disregarding a democratic vote?
Yes. And I think that the mess that we're in is, there's no easy way now. And look, David,
it's anti-democratic, isn't it? You're ignoring the will of the people.
I think what is really anti-democratic is for MPs, who are the leaders of the country, elected representatives, government opposition right across the piece, for MPs to vote for something that deep down, most of them, and privately they say, this is going to damage the country. I think it's not democratic to say the deal the agreement, we put that back to the people to say, is this what you wanted? And I suspect that if that choice was given to the people, they'd say, no, it's not. Because how can a Leaver vote for this? This is not the Brexit that they wanted.
Isn't this Parliament's job, though? Why
No, but
put it
that's
back
been-
to a divided nation, divided again, unleash all sorts of forces of, God knows what the campaign would be like? It's a very dangerous proposition, isn't it? It could make things worse.
I don't think so. I really don't. I'm not pretending it would be straightforward. I'm not pretending it's not easy. Listen, these forces are out there anyway. This argument that I keep hearing from both sides, frankly, Labour and Conservative MPs who say that if you do this, it'll unleash these forces of the far right. Are we really saying that we stop ourselves from doing what we think is the right thing because we're worried that bad people on the extremes of politics are going to exploit it? The job of leaders, surely, and MPs are all leaders, is actually to think really deeply, as Joe Johnson has clearly done, and I think a lot of MPs are thinking this. This is one of the biggest votes they're ever going to have to face in their lifetime, because it's going to set the course of this country for the rest of our lives. And so they've got to think about that.
But how is it actually going to happen?
Well-
if Theresa May says, under no circumstances, she's not going to put this to Parliament. If she doesn't put it to Parliament, it doesn't happen.
She also said under no circumstances would she have a snap election. As Michel Barnier has said, is that he's noticed in negotiations, Theresa May tends to say no until she says yes.
You think she will change her mind?
I think she'll be forced to change her mind because
Why?
the country is not accepting this. Look,
But can't she just plough on? If it gets
could
voted
plough
down,
on.
she can just
She
let
could.
Britain Brexit at the end of March.
I think
What's
the-
to stop her?
I think the politics of that are virtually impossible. And I think it's a very, very... You talk about dangers. I think it's a very difficult and dangerous thing to do. I think the reason this is coming to a head in the way that it is that I think MPs are beginning to realise that they are going to be voting for something that they know is going to damage the country. That's a big thing to do. You can have all sorts of differences of opinion, and left and right, and open and liberal and unliberal and all the rest of it. But actually to do that, you never hear any of them anymore saying this is going to be good for the country. The only argument they use is will of the people. But the will of the people can change, just as your poll last week showed it probably is.
Let me just ask you, Macron said today, old forces are unleashing.
Yeah.
This could be, the world slipping into disunity.
That's why it needs leadership.
How do you feel on Remembrance Sunday, bearing in mind your role in Iraq, on this day when we remember the fallen in Iraq as well?
Well, I do think we should remember the fallen in all conflicts, but I also think that today of all days is a day to reflect on the state of our world, on the state of our alliances, on the fractured nature of our politics around the world, and of this real battle of values going on. So, of course, I reflect about those who lost their lives in Kosovo and Iraq and Afghanistan and all of the different conflicts that were part of the story of the government that I was supporting and working for. But I really think at the moment we are at one of those pivotal moments in history, and where the job, the responsibility of MPs individually and collectively is to do the right thing for the country. And I believe the majority of them do believe the right thing actually is to put this back to the people with the option to remain.
Alistair Campbell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've been getting